大家好, 안녕. Hello, I am the Dark Fae, and in this video I wanted to kind of start a new series about my Dungeons and Dragons campaign since I'm super excited about it and I wanted to do some videos on it. So I thought what I would do is kind of keep wanting to say critical recap because that's what Critical Role does, but I would recap what happened in the most recent session and then kind of give my thoughts on what I thought went well or what didn't go well, and kind of what, based off the session, what I'm planning to do for next time. I'm not going to go super into detail just because if my players do see this, I don't want them to be spoiled for the next session. I still want to keep things a surprise. But yeah, so without further ado, here are the confessions of a first-time Dungeon Master. So a little bit of background about, I guess, the world that I've created. I've kind of made my own Dungeons and Dragons setting that's more of a dark fantasy horror theme versus the traditional setting, and I've kind of created my own world and continent with different cities and countries and sections like that are based off of a pantheon that I've also created. I can put up a map, a very basic map, because I don't have an official one yet. But basically, there's the center country of Ixaliad, and the main city there is the Siskorian Keep, which is the neutral city that kind of has a little bit of everything, elves, dwarves, humans, has a lot of outcasts, refugees, so it's kind of welcome to everyone. And then you have all of the nations surrounding it that are all kind of dangerous and all kind of they kind of have their own flavor, I suppose. Each one is kind of dedicated to a certain god or goddess, and so I've got a lot. The way I've done it is kind of, there are the main gods and goddesses, and then beneath them are saints, and each god or goddess has a covenant or a faction. I call them covenants in my world. And players can either be part of the covenant under a saint, which is a little bit more of a religious path, or just in the covenant kind of as a faction under the god or goddess, but they don't necessarily have to worship the god or goddess. So really quick for some examples, I guess. So let's see if I guess I could just show you the map, and then so we have a Selmat to the northwest, and that is kind of the land of the undead. They follow Kror, Lord of Undeath, and so they're very focused on necromancy and raising undead and trying to turn the world into a wasteland. Just south of that are the Blood Lakes, which are kind of the domain of Nalea, the mother of monstrosities, and they're populated with lakes of blood, the Blood Lakes, and lots of tunnels that kind of are home to monstrosities and creatures that Nalea bred, basically. So those are kind of abyssally, demony kind of style. And then just south of the Blood Lakes, I guess, would be Osganthan. Osganthan is a very war-torn country. They really focus on power through might, I guess. So there's lots of warlords there. And they kind of have to deal with skirmishes from the Blood Lakes and from the mountains of where there's orcs and goblins and other kind of monstrous races, and so they're kind of constantly at war, and they follow Loscan, who is the god of war. And then Loscan's sister is, let's see if I can even get this right off of the top of my head. Loscan's sister is Zenaria, who is the Dark Dancer, the goddess of assassins and trickery. Her domain is the country of Prill, and Prill is kind of a network of labyrinths and tunnels and secret passageways built kind of to hide these cities in Prill, and they are the kind of covenant of what's called the Grim Knives, and who are kind of a spy network, very in the shadows kind of a place. And then let's see, south and a little bit east, I guess, of Prill is Cleshant. Cleshant houses the Forest of Rot, which is a forest that has kind of been affected by this kind of unknown blight that's corrupting its inhabitants and plant life and creatures. And then Kleshent is kind of a coastal region that worships Melispa, the goddess of wild nature. This is a lot of information, but background. This is all background. So that's Kleshent, and then to its east, so the very southeast portion of the world is Saros. Did I change it? It's Scaviros. Scaviros, which is kind of the most coastal city because it's home to a lot of like pirates and marauding corsairs, that kind of thing. Their region is connected by like a series of rivers and waterways and canals, so they get around mostly by boat. Dividing Scaviros from kind of the rest of the mainland is the 10 Carisian Highlands, and that's kind of where a lot of barbarians and nomadic kinds of people are. And then at the base of that, just but north, is the Wetcancel Marshes, which is also kind of dedicated to goddess of wild nature Melispa, but you kind of have like your stranger kind of druidy things, like kind of like shamans and like witches and like kind of just a more mysterious kind of marshland. And then let's see. So then to the north of that is Alith Malar. Alith Malar is where the bulk of magic research and like where wizards mostly are. They are a very strong group of mages who kind of protect them, or they're very isolated and they protect themselves from the Great Schism, which is this big like black chasm that separates Alith Malar from Verdok. And there's a bunch of spookiness about it that they have to keep protected and contained, and they are kind of its keepers as well as like keepers of a lot of magic knowledge. And Verdok is a very and they are under Yorkaden, the god of scholarly research and knowledge and erudition. Okay, and then Verdok, wow, this is a lot. I'm just kind of rambling. Verdok is kind of an uninhabited region. There are I'm not going to go into it yet because my players don't know, but there are kind of like unnamed horrors there that the mages of Alith Malar are trying to keep from spilling into the rest of the country, or at least into their ironclad tower. And then to the north, which is like, so west of Verdok and north of Ixaliad, is Hasdara Minak, or the Sunless Battlefields. And this region is kind of just a old wasteland battlefield that's been shrouded in darkness, that lingered from previous battles. Mostly home to dark elves and dark dwarves, or drow and dwerger, who kind of either live in small civilizations in this battlefield or in the mountains that kind of border it. And then to the west of that is the Frozen Wastes, which is just a very frozen, snow-capped kind of tundra-y mountainous area. And then to the very north is a place called the Far Reaches, which is kind of a mysterious place that no one really knows about. That is like rumored to kind of be very magical and to have like special properties. So I think that covers pretty much all of the regions and stuff of my world. I didn't go over all of the saints and all of the gods and goddesses, but I did name a few, I guess. So there's like 4 main kind of more evil gods: Kror, god of undeath, Vral, the god of insatiable hunger, Wistria, who is kind of the goddess of the lurking dark, which is like fear, like nightmares. And then you have Nalea, who is the mother of monstrosities. Then you have a bunch of good gods like Yorkaden, god of knowledge, and Sethalris, god goddess of justice, and like a lot of that. Hamas is the god of protection. So yeah, a lot of kind of like sides to worship versus non-worship. And so because I wanted to kind of give my players the option to be either on the good side, on like the neutral side, or like even on the bad side. Like I gave them options, like if they wanted to be in a cult, they could be in a cult. If they wanted to be like a bunch of assassins trying to kind of champion, say, Aremsia, the goddess of the lurking dark. Not Aremsia, that's Wistria. They could do that. So let me tell you a little bit about our party. Mostly just give kind of like the very basics. So we have a wood elf druid named Valhyri. We've got a, let's see, what order do I want to go? We have a elven fighter named Teral, a warforged fighter named Ivar71, a human bard named Basil, a hobgoblin wizard named Morgal, and there's not really Shadarkai in my world because I don't have all of the history that goes with Shadarkai or that region, so I'm calling them shadow elves. Shadow elf cleric, death cleric named Umric. So those are our 6 party members, and they've all kind of gathered in the Siskorian Keep for their own reasons. So for the first session, I know there's like a classic kind of first meeting in a tavern, you know, for campaigns or one-shots, but I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to do something that would kind of set the tone for the world, as well as like be very, like something that was like very appropriate for this world that is very dark and very difficult and very harsh. So I felt like meeting in a tavern was a bit too normal, I guess, for this. So what I did was all of them kind of came in at different times. I had them kind of like roll initiative for like what order they would appear in, and what I did was they arrived at kind of like the town center, or the keep, Siskorian Keep center, where there was an execution taking place. And so I had an announcer kind of up on stage talking, giving like this poofy speech about like why this person should be executed, who said he was like a cultist of Kror and that's why he was going to be executed. And so the beginning scene was kind of they all gathered and watched, and this whole crowd is there, and the city official who's kind of presiding over this allows the cultist to say his last words, as kind of is common in many executions, and the guy starts yelling out in Abyssal. None of my players speak Abyssal, so they don't know what he was saying, but it was mostly like kind of a prayer, I guess, or like kind of like he's prophesizing, like, oh, bow before Kror, Lord of Undeath, for he shall come and like wipe the living from the land, etc., stuff like that. And so in that kind of beginning chaos, the executioner is able to kind of rest him down onto the block and chops off his head. And then in the kind of like silence that follows, where everyone just kind of like doesn't know what to do anymore, the body kind of shudders, and then like this undead ooze kind of explodes from its body, and that's the first and then I have all my players roll initiative, and that's their first encounter. I thought starting with combat would be interesting, and kind of like you're just instantly thrown into the world. I didn't really want to do a warm-up because I think this was just kind of more engaging, and yeah, it really gets your players like into the thick of it just immediately. So I know that like they're that it might be a bit too fast, especially if they're first time players, but we'd kind of gone through like we'd started a couple different campaigns and like have done a few one-shots, so I felt like they were pretty used to like the mechanics of the game already, and I just kind of wanted to try and grab their interest right away. So I actually made up the undead ooze myself, kind of taking from the oozes of in the monster manual, and I think it was the Slithering Tracker in, I believe it's Volo's Guide to Monsters. So I kind of made up my own character. I'll put up its stats so you can see, and it was a lot of fun. I thought the mechanic of like them splitting was very cool because it's kind of a deceptively difficult challenge. They did make a lot of their dex saves, so it wasn't quite as difficult as I'd hoped it would be, but I still think one of the oozes did like 20 damage in one turn after succeeding on that grapple, and so that was like pretty significant, so that was cool. And yeah, one of my players they rolled like a natural 19 plus something to try and get some of the ooze remains into a vial, so that's kind of something that I could have fun with in the future. But after they kind of bested the oozes, no one died, luckily, in this first encounter. They met with the captain and his lieutenant of the Castle Guard. That's what I'm calling it, the Castle Guard. And so they get so they're tasked with kind of reporting to them the next day for a reward for their service, and any kind of help, any kind of like quests that the city needs help with. And so after that, since some of them needed to rest and stuff after the encounter, they went back to their kind of little abode. And this was something interesting that I found, because one thing, I'm not going to try and like rant or throw shade or anything like that on anything that happens or that might be less than great in the campaign or the sessions. The one thing was that I didn't really get all of their characters squared away before the session. Like we had to do some housekeeping kind of in session, and I think it worked out okay. Because now that I know at least all of their characters, kind of in game, we established that 4 of them had like been in the Sisquarian Keep for some time, and like 2 others were kind of outsiders coming into their group. And so we kind of established, so if you've been here for a while, then where do you live? What do you do for fun? Like, how long have you guys been together? And that was actually surprisingly okay. Like, it wasn't too bad to not have that all hammered out beforehand. And I think it was kind of a fun opportunity to give the players like time to like think about their own backstory a little bit, and kind of answering questions that are like relevant in the moment goes a little bit more in depth, I think, than just talking about it kind of outside a session, just like brainstorming. So that was actually pretty cool, and I think there are some cool details that came out of it. Let's see, more recap. So after they fought the oozes, they went back to their house, rested a little bit, and then they ended up going to the Boar Pits, which is a tavern on the 3rd level, which is like the least wealthy and kind of most common level. There's three levels to the Sisquarian Keep. The first is the most wealthy, where the Viscount and like his family live. The second is like still pretty decently well off, with like the markets and the military living there. And then the third is like the more peasant-y kind of layer, with a lot of farmland, a lot of very dilapidated like houses, kind of like that. So they went to the Boar Pits, where, surprise, surprise, they have a fighting pit where they signed up to do they want to do a fist fight, like one-on-one, but he also, this is Teral, our elven fighter, but he also wants to bring a bear, and that bear is supposedly Valkyrie, our druid, who can shapeshift, obviously. So I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. So this is now like my thoughts for next session. I think it would be really cool to have like a fight, like a full-on fight with her as a bear and the fighter versus another person and like some sort of animal. But depending on how it plays out, I might turn it into a skill challenge versus just like a one-on-one brawl, because I do want to be able to incorporate everyone. And I mean, of course, I could always add things to do in the tavern, but I'm worried that if it just ends up being kind of a one-on-one fight, then the other players won't really have anything to do in the tavern, or they'll kind of just be bystanders, which is okay in D&D. But I feel like with our group particularly, some of the players tend to kind of check out a little bit when things are focused on another player. So I really want to try and get everyone engaged and everyone involved in this opening scene for session 2. Let's see. So yeah, I'm gonna see if I can somehow like turn that into a skill challenge, and then without giving too much away. And then now I also have to think of quests for next time. I do have a few that are kind of either involved with what happened at the execution, or that I can use to kind of introduce interesting characters or people in Siskorian Keep. My favorite right now is the goth elf that I made. Her name is Fernay, and she runs a store on like the 2nd level, which is called the Crow's Quill. And I actually really like her character, and I really want to incorporate her more. They've met her in the board pits for reasons I won't say yet, that I won't divulge because they don't know. But they haven't visited her shop or anything since we ended at the tavern. But I'm really excited to potentially do more with her. And I've been having trouble kind of deciding where to take them, like if they should stay in the Siskorian Keep for a while, or maybe their quest will kind of take them to a different area, because the world is kind of almost too big, I think. Like there's a lot of different possibilities and directions they could go. And the other thing is too that I do want to weave in their backstories, but because I got characters a little bit late, I still haven't really fleshed out what I want to do for each of them. It is also kind of early. Like I know I don't have to do backstory stuff in the 2nd session, but if it presents itself, I kind of want to be ready. So that is something I'll have to do too, is kind of go through and kind of outline what I want to do for their backstories, and like what quest lines might make sense to introduce some of those elements. Because personally, I think backstory stuff is some of the most fun in Dungeons and Dragons. And also, it feels weird to kind of not have a set beginning, middle, and end. Because normally when I'm planning out a story, I've got the beginning very much fleshed out, the end very much fleshed out, and the middle is kind of something that I feel through, something that kind of is just generated kind of as I go. But with this, I kind of wanted to leave it open-ended, because we've done one kind of with an overarching storyline before that didn't really go too well. Kind of because I think the players weren't that into the story that was going on. And then, so we all kind of agreed that we wanted to try something that was like a little more procedurally generated, a little bit more episodic. So I kind of am going with a series of quests that are happening, and then like planning out backstory elements to weave into those quests that will eventually lead to an overarching storyline that they kind of choose based off of like what quests they go on and like where it takes them. So that's what I'm trying. It's a little bit weird and a little bit open-ended. Like I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know exactly like what I want the end to look like, which is super weird for me. I don't know if I like it. So I think once I flesh out a little bit more of what I want to do for their backstories, then maybe I'll have a better idea of where to go. But for now, I've come up with a few quest ideas and a few interesting people that they can meet around Siskorian Keep, and I think that'll be good. I think I'm gonna see if I can, like, I don't think they will finish the quest in the session. Like, it should take at least 2, depending on which quest they take. But yes, I still need to plan encounters though. Because also I want each session to kind of have accomplished something. I do like side quests and downtime and stuff like that, but I don't want it to feel like we're at a standstill, if that makes sense, because we have had sessions in the past, not in this campaign, in the previous campaign where I was a player, so I felt it definitely, where we've had kind of some sessions where it felt like we played for a long time, but we didn't do anything at the end of it, and it felt just kind of like not great. So I want to see if I can avoid that and like have the players feel like they accomplished something, or that the path to their next destination is clear. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this first session. I wish I'd filmed this earlier, since we actually played like almost 2 weeks ago at this point, but it's still before the next session, which is tomorrow, so still counts. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and if you guys are Dungeon Masters or players, let me know how your first session went and what you guys did. I'd love to hear more ideas, because I feel like the first session is always like the most difficult to do, to kind of like introduce everything, introduce the world, make it fun, make it interesting, and put them into like a new encounter and practice combat. And there's just, I feel like there's like a lot of things, and it's pretty difficult to put together. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time on Confessions of a First Time Dungeon Master. Bye!